Can you put a stage shot on, just so I can see what it'll look like? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you iron your shirt, Dustin? Okay. Your posture is great. Well, everybody, it is now 6:05 on Friday night. I can't remember the date, but April something, 21st. And we're here at South Beach Church, gathering with our neighborhood community from the Wilder community, as well as others from other areas. We're recording this service live, and we're using microphones and cameras in order that people that couldn't join us tonight would be able to tune in live. How you guys doing out there? Or watch it on demand later. This is on YouTube and Facebook, and it'll be archived in those ways. And if you have any questions while you're watching right now, you could comment below. We've got 3 people in our tech booth in the back. Now they'll be able to field those questions and put them on the screen in the back, most likely. And or if we don't get to that question, you can at least email it to us at southbeachchurch@gmail.com. I've got on my left here Tim Gross, who works for Civil West Engineer, and he'll go ahead and introduce himself in a little bit. And we've got Dustin Capri, who works for Capri Architecture over here also, and he'll introduce himself in a little bit. I'm holding this microphone, but it's not even on. When we're going to have people from the floor talking and asking your questions, you're going to go ahead and grab this microphone, and I'll show you what it sounds like. I'll turn this microphone off now. Now I'm on this one. And so when you use this microphone, we'll hear you, and everyone else out there in technology land will hear you as well. So that's what we're going to try and do tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and sit down now. And we've got about a half dozen, maybe 10 people here gathered with us and more tuning in. If I didn't introduce myself, my name is Luke Frechette, and I'm one of the pastors here at South Beach Church. I moved back to Newport in 2010, August 29th. My family and I moved from Ashland, Oregon. We'd been in Ashland for 13 years. Before that, I lived in Newport for 7 years. Mark Watkins, sitting in the back there, is my very first boss. He hired me at age 13. Turning 14, real close on the cusp there of the Oregon labor law, but he was, training me how to work. And I worked for Mark at age 13 and 14, all the way to 17 at Subway when it was over by the Safeway. And then my dad, Joe, opened up Cocomoca Joe's, and I went to work for him as well. And so I'm a Newport Cub graduate and wrestled at Newport High and was part of the school there in that fashion many years ago in the 90s, graduated in 96. And as I said, I moved away. So that's a little bit about me now. It's such a joy to be back in Newport and to be serving here, to be living here, spending probably more than half of my life here in Newport. So I consider myself a local in that way. I was born in Bend, Oregon, Minnesota for 3 years. And then the rest of the story I just shared. So what I'm going to do tonight, we're going to present to you our project moving forward. Whenever people ask us, where's the new church? What's going on? I say, well, if you open up that door and look outside, you'll see a tuft of trees. That's the trees we now own. There's 12 acres right there, which is an interesting concept that it's just right there. I say that because we began looking for land in 2013. It's now 2023. And as you guys know who are from here and maybe been around a while, land is not easy to find, to buy and build and to develop. We have exhausted I will just be honest, 99% of all options where we could move from this building, including taking other churches over or other abandoned buildings in town and Agate Beach. And when the movie theater shut down in COVID, we thought, is that where we should go? And we've really exhausted all of the creative options. And yet, right there in our backyard, if you would, the land has been right there next to where we've been for over 20 years in this garage. I won't go into the whole story. I'm a good storyteller, so if I tell too many stories, just give me the signal right here. Just say, next, next story. And so we've been meeting in this building for many years. The city of Newport bought this building around 7 years ago from the Shones family, and they became our landlord, and we signed a contract there, and they became our landlord, and we're the tenant, and we pay monthly rent to them. And we just began looking for land, knowing that God was going to provide for us. I thought it was going to be faster than it was. I don't know if you guys ever done development projects. Everyone says, this takes a long time. And I'm like, this takes a long time. This takes a long time is now what I'm saying to other people. And people from our church are asking us, when are we going to start? And I was like, this takes a long time. And I've learned so many lessons. I'm only 21 years old right now. Kidding. 45 years old almost. But I've learned so much in the last 10 years that I believe God was teaching me in this process of waiting. And I just want to tell a quick story. What happened is right here on the stage, I was talking to a friend of ours who was represented as a real estate agent, and she asked me, she said, do you have any designers in your church? You're going to need a building designed. I said, I don't even know who goes to our church. Our church was growing. And the very next Sunday, Dustin and Amanda Capri introduced themselves to me right here. It was right around the year 2013-14, and we became very good friends. They said, we're moving from Eugene to Newport, and we're going to begin our practice. We're just finishing our architect schooling, and I thought, I need an architect who wants to be my best friend. Can we have coffee tomorrow? And we began to then talk about what it would look like to design a building, to buy land, and we've been doing this now for, I guess, a decade now almost. It's been a long time, and it's been awesome. Right around that time, I was introduced to Bonnie Sirkin, and I was introduced to Bonnie Sirkin in August of 2013, and it was right up the road. It's actually crazy because I know the whole story. I won't go into all the details, but it was on the very parcel right adjacent to us that we ended up purchasing from Dave Stoker. And I met Bonnie Sirkin, and she said, hey, would you like to build your church right here? And I looked at the property that she was identifying. It's now what I call the sliver. It's the piece that's for sale right there on 40th and Harborton. And I said, I don't think it's big enough in 2013. She said, well, what about that piece across the street, which is where the trees are still upright, right by the Tryon piece of land where the OSU now dormitories are going. She said, what about there? And I looked at it, and I'm not a developer. I was like, there's too many trees, and it's a valley. I don't know. And she said, well, what do you want? How big of a piece? And I said, I don't know. And she continued to, hold my hand through this whole project. And eventually, after months and years, we went up the hill right there where the current dog park is. In the current dog park, we identified as one of her commercial pieces, very special to her. And we said, what if we bought this commercial piece here and put our building there, and then we use the parking lot of the college, which has, nobody uses the college on Sunday. It's shut down. There's all kinds of parking. I said, this is going to be brilliant. We actually spent around $13,000 on infrastructure and testing, geotech drilling. We built a road up there right by the dog park, and it all kind of fell to nothing. While we were going through those processes, we identified the BGB parcel, which is right past the white gate on the right there. There's 36 acres of beautiful land up there, and we were in negotiations with the 3 siblings. Now there's only 2. One has gone on. And we negotiated with them and made counteroffers and offers, and we did more testing. And Dustin and his wife Amanda actually designed and put together all kinds of ways to subdivide the land, and we were negotiating with other businesses how to make 36 acres work. And we spent about 2 years doing that as well. And I'm not lying on any bit of this story. The whole time we wanted this piece right over here, which we got. Derek Tokos was going to be here tonight, but he was unable to make it. And every time I go in to talk to Derek Tokos about a piece of land that I'm looking at, he would always tell me why it's not a good piece and why it's not going to work. And he'd always crush my dreams, as Derek is so good at doing. And love you, Derek. And then one day I went in and I pointed out this land, that's 12 acres. I said, what about this piece? And Derek took a step back, and he smiled, and he pointed. He said, that's the piece that the church should get. And I said, what did you say? I said, can you say that? Say it one more time and just heal my soul. Let me know I had a good idea for once, And he said, that's the piece that you should get. And he gave me a couple of reasons why it's perfect. It's out of tsunami zone. There's nothing around it. It's just going to be perfect. But then we realized it's not for sale. It's never been for sale. The owner, it's actually owned by a couple of brothers and sisters. There's no way to get it. But I began praying about it. Can we get this piece of land? While at the same time, we were heavily pursuing the BGB parcel, 36 acres. And as we were about to make a counteroffer and acquire the BGB parcel, we were about to do it. We'd gone back and forth. We knew they were going to accept this next offer. I was on the Aquina Bay Bridge, and Paul Shones, our president, the president of the board, South Beach Church, Dr. Paul Shones, called me and said, hey, before we do that, can you call Dave Stoker one more time? I said, who? There is no Dave Stoker. The phone number I have goes to a dead end. I've left messages with people. I've never connected with him in 18 months of trying to find him. He doesn't exist. And Paul Schoen said, just one more try before we commit to 36 acres. And so I called the number that I had, and someone answered. I was on the Aquina Bay Bridge speakerphone, and Dave Stoker answered and said, hello. And I said, oh, this is Pastor Luke. Who's this? He said, this is Dave Stoker. I said, wow. Okay, well, and I introduced myself quickly. I forgot how to talk for a second. But I said, my name's Luke Frechette. I'm the pastor at South Beach Church, and we're looking for land in South Beach. You're a native. Do you have any creative ideas where the church could relocate? And I quote, he said, well, I'm about to build a house on my property, and if I were to ever choose a neighbor, I suppose the best neighbor to have would be a church. Can you meet me at my property in 20 minutes? Now, I'd been looking for him for 18 months, and he answered finally and said, sure, why don't you just build your church right next to me? That'd be perfect. And I met him 20 minutes later at the property, the 12 acres. He came up, got out of his truck, didn't look me in the eye. I was there with Pastor Marty Atkins, who now lives in Nashville, and Dave Stoker got out of his truck, didn't look at either one of us, didn't shake our hand, got out and began to then give us a 12-acre tour of that land. Every tree that he and his dad had planted, all the things that he had done over his entire life. And he just gave us a tour. It's very special to him, and telling us of the windstorm of 1964 and how the tree had laid into the canyon, and he made me go look at it, and I saw it. There it is, And we went, and as we finished the tour, he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, Dave, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. He said, it matters what God thinks. I said, are you okay if we pray right now? Is that okay with you? I didn't even know this guy. He said, sure, let's pray. And I prayed and asked God if it be his will that he would show us that this is where the church is to relocate. In Jesus' name, amen. It was a simple prayer, and we went on. That was about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And we began to develop a very close relationship with Dave and Ember, his daughter, and Candace, his sister, and now his new wife, Deborah, who I got to do their wedding last year. And it was amazing. Long story short, there was all kinds of things within the family dynamics of the Stoker clan that needed to resolve before we could actually make an offer on the land. And it took many, many, many years and a lot of prayers to get to that point where they could finally take the land, allocate it to the families through a inheritance, and then rightfully sell it to the church, where we made an offer to Dave. He accepted on that offer November 1st, 2022, where we finally went into escrow or whatever they call it. He took our money, we took the title. That's how it works. And then we got the land. So it's been a long, long process. Dustin will tell you a little bit about the design concepts that we've come up with. I believe we're on version 18. 18 buildings we've designed over the last decade, in order that we would be on this parcel or in that area. I didn't even mention the 200 acres that we almost bought from Bonnie down the road. She's going to give us a screaming deal off 50th Street, but we weren't able to put that together. And all of the various things that have led us. And by the way, I mentioned my own character and growth that God's done in me in 10 years. If you know anything about growing, you grow as you get older and you get wiser and you get smarter, and hopefully, and you become a better person in these ways. But I believe also we've learned a lot architecturally and what designs are going to work best for our community. As you guys maybe see on Sundays living by here, there's a lot of people that go to our church here, and we take care of a lot of people from the community, South County and North County and East County and even West County, which is the fishermen. And we have a privilege of taking care of a lot of people here, and we don't take that lightly, and God is continuing to grow us. So that's just kind of where we're at, and I'm just the pastor. These are designers and builders and developers. We hired them to make sure that we do it right, and we're super excited about doing it right. Some of the things that have come up in conversation and discussion, we're excited about answering those questions and kind of going through making sure that people know that we care. One of the greatest commandments in the Bible is to love God, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so it's really important that we dwell with one another in that same way, caring for each other and loving for each other. It's a high call and a mandate on the church of God. So that's just a little bit. I could keep going and tell some other stories. I'm going to keep them to myself. If you have questions about stories later, I'm going to turn it over to Dustin, though, and he's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the building, the design, the concepts, and the things that we've talked about and discussed and solved in order that we could do it the best possibly way.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Dustin Capri. My wife and I run Capri Architecture in Newport. I see some familiar faces from the Planning Commission meeting, so some of you have already heard a lot of this presentation, but I think Luke, covered it really well. We've been designing this building for almost a decade now and looked at more pieces of property than I ever thought we could look for to find something that would actually work and be viable. As we went through that property search process, I think what Luke alluded to, when we found this property, it was like, okay, this is a big enough piece that version 1, which is the dog park version of the church, the reason that fell apart was there wasn't enough parking. There wasn't enough place to put parking. We couldn't get a parking agreement with the community college at that time. And so now here we are, at version 18 with an area where we can actually accommodate the parking, a building where we can actually accommodate the church, and then a new building, which, was always a really important part of the design process for us, is making sure that the building's big enough to accommodate the church, but also not too big, something that the church can reasonably move forward with, something that we can think about sound and acoustics, which we've done extensively in the design. So I know that's something that there have been a lot of concerns about of, how's the noise going to be. I don't think it's a secret to anyone that this fisherman warehouse, which looks fancy and has lights, it's a fisherman warehouse that's made out of steel. So it was never designed properly. It was never designed to be a church. So, the new facility is going to be significantly different from an acoustic perspective. If anyone would like, the church coordinated with Team Wilson Media, who's a sound acoustic consultant. We're architects, so we have a understanding of acoustics, but we really do rely heavily on the experts when it comes to acoustic design. It's a really unique aspect of architectural design. And I think if any of you have had the opportunity to read their letter, we tried to really tackle the acoustic concerns on a multifaceted level. I think that's probably it on the building design. Tim, you may want to talk a little bit about parking because I know that's something that's been a concern, parking and traffic as well. So I'm sure we'll have more questions that hopefully I can answer for everyone. And most importantly, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Tim Gross. I'm a senior project manager with Civil West Engineering here in town. And I've lived in Oregon since 2010, moved here from Minnesota. And I'm wondering if actually you could put up the drawing on the screen. And we can talk a little bit about the site design. I mean, most of the site design today has been really around how much parking can we fit, where's it going to go, how is it going to work, how are you going to access the site, and then you know, the church fluctuates in the amount of people that attend based on Christmas and Easter or special events. And so you don't want to necessarily build a giant parking lot that never gets used, but you want to have the additional parking when you need it. And so we do have some overflow parking that we're looking at building in as a sports field. And there are products that you can use where you can plant grass and then drive cars over them occasionally and put some reinforcement underneath them so that they don't sink. And so that's the goal. I've been working with some vendors on that already. We use that type of technology for providing access for fire trucks over areas that are normally grass, but you need to be able to get a fire truck in occasionally, and so you plant it with these support mechanisms, and you can run a 50,000-pound vehicle over it. And so there's a proposed sports field on the east side of the building, but the parking spaces that we're required to have is based on the number of, what was it based on? The number of seats in the church, I believe.
Yes.
The occupancy of the church, and I want to say we needed to have 142, and we have 147, just as normal, you know, your typical paved parking lot. And I believe that we had done a count of vehicles on Easter, and it was actually less than 147. And so, you know, there's some more parking there to accommodate growth in the future. But on the normal, typical day, there's more than adequate parking to handle all of the needs. I know people are concerned with the potential of people parking along 40th and Harborton there, and frankly, there's probably no way we could ever stop somebody from doing that other than asking them not to. But there's enough distance between the road and the building, and there's enough parking that unless somebody had an extreme reason why they felt like they needed to park on 40th and Harborton, there's no reason they have to park on 40th and Harborton. I don't know how to explain it differently than that. And even the parking is designed in such a way that you could pull in with a trailer. So if people are visiting and they have a camper, if they can find 2 spaces, they could pull in and not have to park out on the road. But there's just no way we could make a promise that somebody wouldn't park out on the road. The site generally drains to the north and to the west. And to the west of this property is where the old Central Lincoln PUD yard used to be. I believe it's now Builders Supply has started their warehouse there. And so the site drains to the north and to the west. And there's been some questions about where that water's going to go. And there is an estuary to the north of the property, but it's a long ways away from where the developed part of the property is. And so the concept is to capture the water and direct it to the north through stormwater features that will help deal with any sort of pollutants that we may have. And then the property on the north end is very, very steep. And there's been some concerns about the impact that the development may have on the ecosystem and some of the native species that are down there, and sort of this very unique estuary that you don't see very often. And so there's I want to say it's like 130 feet in one location. It's a pretty long proposed easement that we want to have on that north slope, which is really where the steep slope is. It's an unbuildable area for us. We don't have to touch any of the trees in there, and it provides a nice buffer. That said, the city has been always interested in building a trail along Chestnut Street, partly for tsunami evacuation and partly for connecting to the trails that are in Wilder. And so on the design concept, we do show adding a trail along the western side of the property. There's an existing road grade in there already that Dave Stoker must have used for something. And so it's kind of a natural area to be able to start that trail, but then also have our stormwater feature run along sort of that same corridor and ultimately make it to the north. And so I don't know what the city's long-term plans are for that trail. There would be quite a bit of work necessary to complete that because it's some rough terrain. But, you know, now they have a willing partner to be able to work with them on that, and ultimately I can see that passing through the property. But I think from the design concept, all we can really do is run it up to the top of that slope, and then from there has to be some more master planning with the city. Anything else that I don't think I covered?
No, I think the only other thing regarding parking on Harborton, and I made this point during the planning commission meeting, but the front entry of the church is 250 feet away from the Harborton. So, just from a convenience standpoint, it's a really long walk. I think if we have all this adequate parking, more than adequate parking in front of the church, especially with the overflow that was added based on comments from the community, I think the risk of that's very low.
One more thing. We had a question at one point about the driveway grade. And I think it actually came from one of the planning commission members, but there's an access off of Chestnut now that the church is using just to gain access to the site. That is not the permanent driveway elevation. In fact, that property has had quite a bit of fill on the western side. If you go up and stand on the site, you can actually see where somebody had dropped fill and sort of dozered it off toward that Chestnut Street access. And so that west side of the site is going to come down quite a bit because it's just a promontory there now. And that will bring that road grade down to the point where it's well within the fire code access. It's much easier for people to access, and it will make our site work a lot better.
I think one of the reasons why the parking is such a question is we had an event in August last year. It was a 5K public fun run. We contracted a local running agency to run that for us and to produce that event. It was kind of a 2-day event. We decided to, on Saturday, do the fun run / back to school carnival for everybody. And then we put so much infrastructure and planning into it. I said, hey, let's just have church up here on Sunday as well, since we're doing so much, and everyone thought that was a great idea. And this was, again, last August, I believe. And so we didn't even own the land. We essentially got permission from Dave Stoker and said, hey, can we use the land? And then we literally contracts with insurance and riders and permission from Bonnie Sirkin to use her access point and all of her parking along Harborton as well. So we did everything that we felt we needed to do. We actually had the fire department come out, I think multiple times, as well as be on site the entire event, 2-day event. Ensuring that there was water available, there was no grass fires, all that. We brought the grass down. It was actually really cool to see it all come together. There was a lot of cars there on Harborton from Saturday to Sunday than there were Thursday and Monday. There's just so if you were a neighbor or lived up here and you drove up one day and saw the amount of cars, it would have been such a surprise, maybe even a nuisance, even though we made sure we had, I wouldn't call them ushers, we had parking lot attendants. There was never any traffic jams, there was no problems whatsoever, but there was, maybe 75 cars at one point on the road. One day, then the next day they're gone. That's just a lot. It's a surprise. I think the owner, a manager, employee of Wolf Tree was actually offended or just wished that we had let them know. And as I think about it in retrospect, I thought to myself, Wolf Tree is about a half mile away. It's up the hill. Our whole event is down below. And I just didn't think that it had anything to do, it wasn't going to impact anybody. That's just my mind. I was thinking about probably 10,000 other things. That was a mistake on my part, not letting the community know better, even though we'd gone through Bonnie and Leanne and had contracted a professional running company that uses Wilder and uses the trails up there. We were just trying to create a community event. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a bunch of cars. And so everyone's a little skittish now. Is the church going to continue to just park on the streets whenever they want, wherever they want? This wouldn't be conducive to our needs, as Dustin just pointed out. If a person chose to park on the street, which is actually, I think, legal, and they can, they're going to have to walk over 250 feet then to the church, where they'll pass many paved parking spots that we've provided for them. So it won't make sense. I do remember being part of a church in Seattle years and years ago, and they dealt with parking issues as well because their church was massive and the neighbors were getting frustrated. And so as you walked many, many city blocks to the church, you would find little signs, nice real printed signs on businesses. No Mars Hill church parking. No, and they were provided for these businesses from the church. The church said, hey, we're not trying to mess with you guys. We realize you're a small mom and pop business, et cetera. So there was a real mutual understanding. We don't want that to be the case. So the fact that we have 147 allocated parking spots, and then I can't remember, 190 overflow parking spots or something, it's very, very adequate. And I mentioned this, I was on a Zoom meeting last Monday during the CUP, conditional use permit application meeting. And I mentioned briefly that we've been operating here for over 20 years on about 1.2 acres. This is where we've been functioning and never had a traffic violation, never had a congestion, never once in 20 years. And so now we're going to be on 12 acres, which is quite a bit bigger, and off the beaten path. And so the hope is that it's the same or better than it's ever been. But some of those reasons why there's sensitivities towards parking is I think because of those events that we had that we're forced to, because of the lack of development on our end, use the street in that way. We just weren't ready for interior parking. We did also on that event offer a shuttle system. We encouraged people to park down here. We had about 50 or so cars down here, and we were shuttling folks up in order to keep people off the road. So it was all done to the best of our ability. Could have been done better, though. I do own that.
I did just realize that we're making the assumption that people actually understand how the property is laid out. Could you put the drawing back up again, the overall larger one, please? Actually, can you do the other one instead? Yeah, so to the south of the church property, between 40th Street, is another property. And so when the special event was held, the church did actually use that property, which is Wilder Phase 5, for parking. But that's not actually part of the development. The church is physically separated from the road by that other property, which will probably develop commercially someday. And the only access for the property is actually off of Chestnut Street to the west. And so people are not going to be able to park in that property like they did for that special event, and they're really going to be dissuaded from walking across it too. I'm not sure what the ultimate feature will look like, probably some landscaping or something that is not conducive to people traipsing across Bonnie's property. I'm sure we're going to have to do something like that. But yeah, it is kind of an island of in itself north of there.
Yeah, I think at this point we've kind of said a bunch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down, and I'd love to hear questions that whoever wants to go first, and I'm going to hand the microphone to you, and you can direct them towards me or towards Tim or towards Dustin. Anybody have a question they want to? Yeah. You can just introduce yourself if you want, or just say whatever and let us know who you are.
Thank you very much. My name is Dan McLaughlin, and it's nice to see you again. And I am going to ask questions, and I would like to have some answers as well. But I'd like to start by saying what I started by saying last time I was here. I really liked all the people you had coming and talking about the value of the church to their lives. And I think that was very effective, and I heard that. And good work on the ministry thing. One thing that's come up since that meeting was the unearthing of an article in the News Times, I guess it was, about your earlier problems with sound in this building. And looking around, I can realize where the problems would come from. But in that article, I remember a quote of someone from the church saying, "We get 1,000 people in here every Sunday." And it's on any Sunday. And the numbers that were given to the Planning Commission said that you have like 400 or 500 people on a typical Sunday. Can you address the discrepancy between those two numbers?
Absolutely. And so when you look at a total number of people coming through the doors on a Sunday, that would be the summation of every service added together. So right now you're looking at 295 chairs. So in any service on a Sunday, right now we're not going to ever exceed 295 chairs. Easter Sunday, we added 85 chairs for a total of 385 in the sanctuary, and we had 4 services that day in order to spread out the volume of people. In the back in the kitchen, this particular building is rated, according to the fire marshal, for 532 people, which sounds crazy to have 532 people in here. I'm willing to try it, but to get that many people in here is hard to do. And so if you're going to ask, like, what's the membership, which we don't have membership at South Beach Church, how many people go to your church on any given Sunday? The number 1,000, I don't know when that article was published. It may have been a pre-COVID number because COVID hit our numbers really substantially, as it did with most large gathering spaces. And so we don't see that number right now gathering. We have a lot of online people watching at home. But on any given Sunday, and Dave Adolph is in the back, he actually keeps great records for us. We're probably averaging at our 9 a.m. service, maybe around 260, 270 people, and then that service comes and then goes, and then the next service will be right around the same. We only have 2 services at this point, so that's right around 600 max on any given normal Sunday. It does swell on Easter and Christmas. Not so much on Christmas. Christmas, we have one on Christmas Eve. We don't actually have a service on Christmas Day. And our Christmas Eve services are usually at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, kind of right in the middle of the day. Christmas Eve's also sometimes on a Wednesday. It's, people are working, but we tend to get the people in and get the people out.
You're also going to have a school, and I'm sort of asking about other uses of the property, and do you have a big youth group that comes in or something like that, or?
So youth group on Wednesdays, they meet here. Our middle schoolers meet here, and there's probably around 25 to 30 at the max. And they meet in the sanctuary here. We put the chairs forward, and the kids throw dodgeballs, and we have to replace our equipment all the time. It's fun. And then the high schoolers is a smaller group. They meet on the north side of the bridge at our offices. If you've been to the South Beach Church offices, there's about 20 high schoolers meeting right now. And again, those are post-COVID numbers. It's just where we're at. The school in the future plans for this building up on the hill is that will service our 6th through 12th grade upper grades, so the older crowd, not the younger crowd. And right now we're servicing at the Newport Christian Church in that age range. We're servicing, I think, 42 students in that upper grades. And so that's probably what we're looking at next year. We're actually going to be relocated to staying down here and renting that church again. And we're not going to expand the school at all in that way, and just going to continue to kind of grow maybe year by year, add some preschoolers, and move the school up. So about 40 or 50 or so, I think, was what on the CUP was put there for our school. And the school only meets Monday through Thursday. And we call it a dual usage building. As a matter of fact, one of our inspirations for doing what we're doing is we went up and down the I-5 corridor and all the way up into Portland, and we visited all these amazing churches in the middle of the week, and they were so amazing and empty and somewhat sad. I was like, look at these classrooms for Sunday school are so cool. And these, areas and neighborhoods had schools, and they had Christian schools, but these churches were just empty. And it's kind of fun for me to build a new building and then see it get used, what I would say properly, get it used, and not just be dormant and vacant. This building does get used periodically throughout the week, but it's not overly used right now. We actually tried to start the school here in 2014. I was on the board at Midcoast Christian School, and they were looking for a home. I said, we'll take you guys. This is amazing. They had like 20 students. And the city said, oh, you're in a light industrial zone. You can't have a school. You can have 300 people on a Sunday, but Monday, it's different. And I said, okay, I'm glad I'm not a lawmaker. And I had to let it go. And we weren't allowed to have the school here because it's a light industrial zone, although it is allowed in other zones, like a residential zone where most of the schools are. So we weren't able to use this building. So this building doesn't get used throughout the weeks or throughout the week, just on Sundays. I call it a one-hit wonder building. Sundays, this place is used tremendously. It's beautiful. Like you said, Dan, many, many people's souls are ministered to here. It's a powerful place. And then there's some meetings that happen occasionally here. Celebrate Recovery does meet here on Tuesdays, and they are averaging around about 100 people on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m., which is, might be a large crowd. It's actually not that big. We could fill 300 in here. So the church will get used throughout the week in various ways. And then I'm not sure where your question was going as far as other usage of the 12-acre parcel. Our real hope and intention, and this is something Bonnie mentioned back in 2014, she said, Luke, and this is a direct quote, she said, Luke, when I asked her if we could build a church in her Wilder development, she said no. She said, it's not part of our master plan. If you've ever met Bonnie, she's got it all figured out from now until the year 3050. Got it all planned out. She said, there's no room for the church. And about a year went by, and her and Will contacted me and said, you know what, we've changed our tune. We believe that in a village, the Wilder village, every village historically has had right in the center of it a church. Are you still looking for land? I thought, yes, we are. Well, let's try and make something happen. And in that idea, you know, the church is open to the community. And so our hope is that we take that 12 acres that has not been available to anybody for 100 years, except a small family in our community. And we're going to open it up in a beautiful way where there's trails, there's opportunities for people to come in and enjoy the park-like setting. If you haven't been up there, you're invited to. It's beautiful. It's an amazing, amazing piece of Newport, and it's going to stay that way and become even better and open to people that even don't attend the church or don't consider themselves members, but will feel welcome and that they can access all the resources that we have inside and outside.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
I liked the part that your sound engineers proposed, and it seemed, to paraphrase my understanding of it, is that instead of having like two big amplifiers, you're going to have smaller amplifiers directing the sound in a way that you don't have to turn it up to a 10 so the person in the back has to hear it. Is
Yeah.
that pretty much your understanding?
That would be one of the smallest solution points, in my opinion. The real solution points that our media and sound engineer firm that we've contracted is in the actual engineering of the building and the soundproofing of the walls. These are brand new, by the way. If you look to your left and right, you can see the curtains. We just put those curtains. Those are sound dampening curtains. Those haven't been there. Those are probably about 3 months old. Behind those sound dampening curtains is a 6-inch layer of rock wool. That's also brand new. We just put that up about 5 months ago. I think Christmas Eve. We didn't have the curtains up for Christmas Eve. It was kind of ugly. You can look back there. And so those are new additions to this building that should have been put in there. It should actually be then also kind of covered with either sheetrock, which would be normal, or rock wall, which is something that we're probably going to use in the new building to make sure that all of the walls are treated properly. In addition, can you put the floor plan up there, Dave, for me? The actual blueprint of the floor plan, there it is. You can see the sanctuary in the middle, and on the back left, if you're looking at the screen, it says future offices. On the top of the screen, it says classrooms. On the far right, it says kitchen and multipurpose room. And the building is enclosed, except for that one north wall or south wall. It's a building within a building. And so all of the major sound production will be enclosed into not just the building with walls, but the building after that wall in another building. So we're really confident that the new design, the proper design where the sanctuary is actually enclosed in the church, will absorb the sound it's supposed to absorb. So these things, these sound treatments here at the current building, these are brand new. You'll also see on the walls what we call theater speakers. You would see something like this if you went to the Newport Theater. Those are brand new. We used to have 6 JBLs with 18-inch subwoofers, so 6 18-inch subwoofers hanging from the ceiling here, and we had 18-inch subwoofers under the stage, and those are all unplugged and removed now, and so we've changed all of our sound acoustics from the inside. That was your question. Are we going to use smaller speakers? These are rear-facing or rear-firing speakers or something like that, so the sound doesn't go backwards, it only comes forward, and we're able to contain the sound and direct the sound and get the sound where we want it to go instead of leaving the building. So we've made thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of improvements just in this building to try and keep the neighbors from being frustrated with our existence. I would, with that in mind, say that we've never actually broken any ordinances or sound violations. We've never actually been loud, ever. We have been heard, and you can hear us, just like you can hear Les Schwab, you can hear Super Suds, you can hear any of these businesses that have operations. Oh yeah, I can hear that. And it's crazy. We've had the chief of police here. We've had our own decibel meters. And we're reading them going, yeah, I can hear it, but it's not like against the law. Now, if you lived there, that would be frustrating. You would say, oh man, I don't want to hear that anymore. So we've made every attempt we possibly can to address those sound issues in this building. And it's going to be really fun to see those issues addressed in the design concept in the next building where they're solved before we even build.
I guess my question is twofold at this point. One, would the church ever amplify out music or a sermon, broadcast it out so everybody can hear it?
I would say only within the allowed governances that the city provides for every citizen within the city limits. There are substantial and very, what I would say, guiding ordinances in the city that prohibit and allow people to live in the city. And so we will only ever adhere to what the city allows, never above.
And what's going to happen while the building is in construction? Are you going to continue to have services in this building until the place up the hill is built?
I don't know the future. That's a great question. Yes, and I don't know how that's going to go. Here's what I do know is we have our lease ends on December 31st here. The city at that point can, if necessary, kick us out and we will leave. If we have nowhere to go, we'll go mobile. Many churches do this where they rent a facility such as a middle school or a high school and they just meet mobily for a while. They put all their stuff in storage. The only reason I see the city doing that on December 31st is if they have a reason to take this building and sell it to a developer and they really, really need it. And at that point, we're out of here. Thanks for your hospitality. You've been such a good host for us. We appreciate that. If we're not ready to move in on December 31st, what we will do is we'll go to the city and file for an extension. Is it okay if we can stay for 3 more months until April or something like that? The city will then, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, look up at the hill and say, looks like you guys are doing your best. You're not just sitting around doing nothing. You're working. They're the ones issuing us permits, and I'm not saying holding us back at this point, but hopefully they're going to work with us so we can get shovels in the ground and get going and do it in time. So I don't know. I'm very optimistic, one of the most optimistic people you'll probably ever meet. So I hope we can be out of here by December 31st, but if not, it will be shortly thereafter.
What is your production timeline?
Well, because we've ordered the building already. The steel building's already been under contract to get that building coming out. Dustin might be able to answer that better than I am. He's actually in the business. So, and give me some good numbers, Dustin, because I keep telling people we're hopefully going to be building by August. And again, before you talk, I'll say this. I'm hoping that we'll be able to go in what I'm calling a phase approach, where if you see the design concept, all these framed out walls and these beautiful, intricate things, I'm hoping we can get what's called an occupancy permit, where the city will say, you got your bathrooms, you got your fire sprinklers in, it's safe. It might not be perfect. You might not have everything that you want as a church that one day you'll build internally, but we're going to go ahead and give you a thumbs up to meet there. And that would be, in my opinion, phase 1, where we can afford to do that time-wise. And there might be a whole bunch of stuff in the sanctuary we need to do. The kids' wings might still need all kinds of framing out. But as long as it's safe and as long as the city says, yep, you guys can meet there, we'll go there. I don't know when that could possibly be. What's the best numbers you got for us, Dustin?
So I think, once pending the approval on the CUP, then you can submit a building permit. Building permit is a sort of an unknown number at this time, but the contractor right now had thrown out 8 to 10 months for construction. And then with regards to, like the phased approach, I think Derek had a, condition of approval that all of the acoustic controls were a part of that. So that would be included in whatever the phase is. So the acoustic benefits would be there no matter what.
Thank you. Last thing is about not so much parking, but traffic. And I mentioned this when we talked last time. Especially if you're putting in a school or there's some kind of situation, this is sort of a bottleneck for everybody behind you up the hill. And I guess what I'm asking is that somebody from the church say, we would like another access road as well. Because that is when there were only 12 people who lived up the hill, it didn't really matter what was happening down here. But if there's a situation where we have to get off the hill or we're trapped up there for whatever reason, there is no other way out. And I think that is a concern no matter what this site is being used for. And, right.
And so when you say secondary access, are you saying, in theory, if you could put the other plan up, David, the design shows kind of Harborton. Maybe the next one might show it a little better. There we go. If you see right in the very middle of the diagram, the number 10 on the grayed out area, and kind of then going downwards, there is a road right there. It's an access road that we've been asked not to use at this point. Bonnie Sirkin owns it. We had permission for the last 10 years to use it, and she has since then said, don't use it anymore. And I said, okay. And so we can't use it now. So now we're bottlenecking down below to your left over there by 40th, which is our proper access point. And we've asked her to consider, and I believe she will, acquiesce an easement of sorts where we can use it for access and egress as a secondary access egress point.
I think you're misunderstanding.
Okay.
Or at least I'm not understanding you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
access to 101,
Gotcha.
not off of your property or any other property.
Okay.
But if we have to get out,
Yeah.
sort of,
Understood.
in a larger sense, out
Yeah.
of here.
I think, and Tim could really speak to this, but I do know this, that 50th Street and the top of Harborton where the white gate are by the dog park, that
Right.
is in the city's master plan to connect that as one big master loop. That was one of the hindrances to us buying the 36-acre BGB parcel. The city of Newport said, you could totally buy the 36-acre BGB parcel. We're going to need you guys to build a $1.2 million road that connects 50th and Harborton. This is going to be awesome. You're going to be the main property owner here. And we just couldn't swallow that. But it's actually available, except for that white gate that kind of keeps the traffic there. Is that what you're referring to?
Basically, yes.
Okay, so I believe that's going to happen, and I believe even some of these developments, OSU coming in there with their development with the dorms, I think it'll expedite some of the need for that. You know, kind of what justifies development is need. But this is a growing area, and I think it's going to be beautiful. You all know where the 50th Street connection is there that goes down by the wastewater treatment plant. That's all going to be connected eventually. I don't know if there's a timeline. It's a desire. It already is connected. It's available, and I don't know how solid those gates are. If there's an emergency, if you can kind of pop one open with your bumper if you need to.
Yeah, it's within the city's transportation plan, but it's likely that they'd wait for a developer to develop that property to build the road, unless for whatever reason the traffic is so high in the 40th and Harborton area that there's a South Beach Urban Renewal District, which is in theory actually supposed to go away relatively soon. And those are the mechanisms that often will build a road before development comes along. So I doubt that road will be built until such time that somebody develops the property. But it is one of the most developable properties in Newport, that said. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came along and ultimately decided to develop that. Now, Harborton doesn't actually extend all the way there. Wilder has like a 20-foot strip that would have to be dedicated as a road right-of-way there. So there's a challenge in making that connection happen. But it is there in a tsunami or something like that. It can provide secondary access. There's key boxes there for all kinds of people. Usually I've worked with some of the forestry management companies, and they'll give keys to community leaders for emergency evacuation needs. So that's always a possibility. I have one for the gate behind my house too. But almost certainly that road will connect someday. And, as we had mentioned during the conditional use permitting process, they've figured out how many trips all the development in that area will generate. And actually, the church generates far fewer trips than the maximum density that property can support. And so, in fact, Derek was a little disappointed because he really wants more trips on the road to trigger the warrants for a signal down at 40th Street. And the church.
My response to that was, if you have OSU, you guys, another building for the community college, and maybe a classroom in the woods, and you get 1,000 people all trying to get out of this here, a signal on 101 is not going to be a darn good bit of good.
Yeah, having that upper access out will be so convenient, even on days when there's no traffic. It's just, I'm gonna take a right instead of a left and go down to 50th because I'm going to Walport. It's just, I think it's gonna happen. We just don't know when that's out of our control.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time, but who knows when that will be.
Okay, well, thank you I'm sorry, I've had a stroke, so my short-term memory is not what it should be. So you're not going to say we will never have projected sound, but we'll keep it within what's legal. Is that
That's
what
correct.
I heard? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, and our desire is to be a good neighbor. We want to use our space, to the degree it's usable and for our purposes, but we also want to not be a nuisance to people. So we're grateful for the ordinances that exist that keep us all in the city together in that way, and we just want to. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Then you might want to talk to the person who in the article said we want to just make it seen how loud we could make it or something like that.
Was it a comment or something from?
That was a comment
Okay.
from one of your parishioners
Sure.
that we were really proud about how we can make the walls rock around
Yeah.
here. And in retrospect, they probably shouldn't have said that.
Right? Yeah. Appreciate that.
Does somebody else
Yeah.
want to?
Yeah. Thank you.
Al Albright, my wife Jill and I have been up in Wilder 4 years and 3 days, I think it is now. But Jill and I worked for the National Park Service for an accumulation of about 75 years, something like that. And upon our retirement, moved here to the coast from Missouri for the wonderful air and clean air and the quiet, and that's what pretty much what Wilder provided to us. But early in my career, there's a couple of sayings that I took through every one of my projects. I was an architect, historical architect. I worked on a lot of projects in many areas in the United States as well as on the continent of Europe. And one of them was, poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Now, I realize that you're in a rush to get this done because this place is going away.
A 10-year rush.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But another saying, and Dustin may know the person who said this, God is in the details. You know the architect?
I don't know.
Mies van der Rohe. So I took those two sayings with me throughout all of my projects. You know, insofar as how many stakeholders should be involved in the project planning early on. We had to deal with tribes, engineers, architects, conservators, archaeologists, local, state, federal agencies. So I'm not sure what happened, why we did not, in Wilder, did not get a heads up on this project until just a couple of weeks ago. But you might have to go a little bit farther than what the municipal code requires, you know, informing surrounding neighbors 200 feet away from your property line, that sort of thing. Also, municipal code calling for parking spaces, 4 people per, you know, 4 people.
4 seats per person.
Yeah, yeah. Because
car.
how many people drive to church or Walmart or any other place with a car with 4 people? You probably won't find that many. But you might have to go a little bit beyond what the municipal requirements, code requirements are on some things. Getting into sound, noise, or what have you, I tried to find, after reading the Team Wilson's letter a couple of times, I went to the internet to find something about the personnel, team, their project profiles, that sort of thing. And I found only one page for Team Wilson based out of Birmingham, Alabama. And their website was apparently being closed down because of some certificate denial or something like that. I'm not sure what it was. It was really quite weird. But I could find nothing on Team Wilson. I was looking to see if they actually had licensed or certified acoustical engineers. And I was wondering if you could enlighten us on that, because it seems that Team Wilson provides the sound, the lights, the video, videography. They generate all that, but do they know how to attenuate the sound away from the building?
I'd have to direct you to Team Wilson, and it doesn't sound like you found the right Team Wilson because they're in Vancouver, Washington, not Birmingham. So I can get you their direct contact info, and you could ask them those questions for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're professionals up in Washington.
Okay. getting back to God is in the details once again, with regard to your parking lot, I think you answered some of my questions earlier, especially about a second egress out of the parking lot, where there is apparently one now that Bonnie said you cannot use through that small sliver of land. I don't know if you can get an easement or something sometime on that, but,
We would love one.
pardon?
We're trying to get one.
We'd love one.
Oh, okay, okay. But you might want to take a closer look at some of the turning radiuses, especially if you get parishioners or visitors to the area who come to church, towing that 30-foot RV, buses, delivery trucks, that sort of thing, who can access that parking lot. Otherwise, we might be seeing some of those vehicles parked out on the street as well.
Yeah, that's I think like with the fire marshal, that's a great point. And the fire marshal, when he comes out, I think they have a pretty large truck that they have to maneuver around. That's the standards of turning radius and accessibility. So if they can bring their biggest truck up there with ease and not have to parallel park it or something.
Okay.
But even more than that is just being conducive to travelers and to large vehicles. So
Okay.
it's a good point.
And Tim, maybe you could talk on that too. I mean, just as a civil engineer.
Yeah, believe it or not, the design vehicle for Newport is their ladder truck, which is 65 feet long, I think. And so the design of the parking lot itself is kind of a looped pull through. And so vehicles don't actually have to make a turning movement until they are actually leaving. And so you could one-way this if you wanted. Could you put the drawing back up of the parking lot, please?
He's working on it.
So when you pull in, there's no turning movements that you'd actually make until, I mean, it's basically a giant loop of the parking lot. Wilder Phase 5 is zoned commercially and will develop commercially ultimately. And we do kind of show a little driveway access coming off of that because the driveway will without question be there. And the reason I know that it's going to be there is because the driveway across the street for the property that's going to be used by OSU is there. And the city will require them to align those driveways. So we, with a pretty high level of confidence, can know where that driveway will approximately be. And at some point in the future, if we're not able to acquire an easement from Land Waves, we very likely will try and negotiate with a future commercial property to provide an access there as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
One other question that came up on, with regard to taking care of stormwater, and in places, and Bonnie knows this, in places in Wilder, we have permeable pavement as well as what are called water gardens to take care of some of the overflow. It's possible that you could potentially consider something like that to take care of, to attenuate some of the water.
We will likely have, I'm going to call them a stormwater swale, rainwater garden, vegetated swales that's going to provide water quality treatment for the stormwater without question. The soils here are really non-conducive to permeable pavement. I was a public works director for Newport for 10 years, and we fought with that permeable pavement up in Wilder always. And so there's a reason why there's secondary storm drainage up there, because in really heavy rain events, when, you know, I think you probably noticed that when people would build houses, they drag sediment off into that road and it stopped working. And so it works great when it works, and it doesn't work great when it doesn't work at all, I guess is the best way of phrasing it. And so it's probably what you'll likely see on the parking lot design here is that we'll capture the water in a typical storm drain, and then that will be conveyed to a grassy swale or a vegetated swale, stormwater basin, whatever the case may be. That'll probably actually be designed in series because you want to slow the velocity because there's a lot of hill going north, and it will eventually work its way into the water course where it historically goes now.
I think like one other point on traffic too. I understand the concern and like the number of vehicles, but I presume, and maybe this is an unfair presumption, that most of the community members go down and then actually head north on 101. So, you know, I think Pastor Luke, you plan to have the services the same time or a similar time in the morning. So, 101 has so much more traffic than 40th does, and hopefully, like Pastor Luke alluded to, I don't think you've noticed any traffic jams or congestion at that time along Highway 101. So, with such a lesser demand on that road going down the hill, hopefully, it's never an issue as people are coming in and out for service.
Yeah, our biggest day is the world's smallest day, which is conducive to our usage. Sunday drivers are called Sunday drivers because there's just a different level of traffic, use. So be that as it may, there's still going to be a lot of people, and so we'll have to make the proper, precautions. And
Well, there are times in the summer when I come down Southeast 40th towards the intersection with 101, and there are maybe a dozen cars backed up there, trying to take a left and a right, and they can't do it because of tourist traffic.
Right.
So I usually head north on Ash.
yeah, smart,
And take a left on 35th.
which is now signalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can make it through at that point
Yeah.
in the due course of time.
Yeah.
But until such time that there is a signal light there and/or on 50th Street.
Yeah, and I think there's money allocated for that signalization on 40th Street. They're waiting, it's like 4 or 5 years out. It will happen eventually, so there's going to be an additional signal that'll help control traffic.
Yeah, the south,
Did you lose your mic? Malfunction? I don't think there's any buttons. It's on. But I can't see a button. You just try it again.
hello?
There we go.
I think the South Beach Urban Renewal District actually has funds for that signal. And I think the city is planning on making some of the street improvements itself that will facilitate a future signal in partnership with ODOT, of course, but not actually have a signal there. So there's curb work that will need to take place. I know the city's planning on extending sidewalk down to the south on 40th Street on the east side of Highway 101. And they've actually already put in bases for streetlights there. So there's work actively moving forward for that. But until it meets warrants, the state will not allow them to put a signal there. And so the money that the city has in urban renewal, they're going to use as much as they can to facilitate as much as possible to make that intersection as usable as possible.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, I'm Vendi Ellman. I'm married to Dan. And so we're your closest neighbors.
Okay.
I have one concern
Yeah.
about lighting, and because, in Wilder, it's ask that we don't use our backyard lighting so that people can view the stars. And I'm just wondering what kind of lighting you're planning on and how much light and how often it would be projected.
Yeah, we're going to use black lights, so it's going to be even darker. Just kidding. I was actually on the property a couple weeks ago, and I was actually bummed that the streetlights were as bright as they were. I was on our property trying to look at Orion's Belt and some other things, and I was like, man, why is these streetlights are so bright? And so I'm with you on that. And I think this came up in the CUP meeting. I was in Kentucky during the CUP meeting, but it sounded to me like the majority of the parking lot might have motion censored lights for security purposes that will come on when necessary. But the parking lots won't be lit like a Walmart or Fred Meyer's, the whole parking lot at night. And then the corridors that need security, kind of those high-risk areas, we'll have down-facing lights, and maybe some more security censored lights. But as far as being like, hey, let's light up the hill, at night, that's both not economical, or our agenda. So we're with you. And light pollution, it's fun being out in the woods, and it's always like, oh, turn your light off, neighbor, And so we're going to do our best to not, illuminate everything unnecessarily.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then my second question is about Chestnut Street, which I didn't even know existed. Does it go through to anything? Or is it a dead-end street?
It's a dead-end street right now. When you talk to Bonnie, she'll treat it like it's already developed and it's going to happen one day, and she'll call it Chestnut. I'm like, what's Chestnut? But it is there, and it does. We might have some more information on when that's going to happen or if that's going to happen. Tim might know if it's an urban legend or if it's ever going to connect. Or
Chestnut Street physically cannot be connected to the north any more than it's stubbed now. And the only reason that it's stubbed the way that it is now is to serve this particular property, because you couldn't have subdivided the property the way that it is without a street access. And so if you look at the grades going north on Chestnut Street, it's practically a cliff as it drops down to the old Central Lincoln PUD yard. The right-of-way there is also very, very narrow, and I think that once upon a time, people who are subdividing the properties there realize that there's no way the street will actually go through there. And so the property boundaries, that right-of-way is really narrow, like 40 or 30 feet wide in there. So it is technically platted as a right-of-way, but it's just not possible to develop.
If you ever want to explore Chestnut Street going down 35th, you can find it, and I've done it a few times, and it's kind of gets narrower and narrower, and pretty soon you're in someone's living room. You're like, I don't think I should be here, and you have to reverse out. It's kind of scary. You're in someone's house, essentially, and it's like, okay, this is not a real road. So I don't know if that answers your
Well, and I
question.
believe it actually crosses that wetland of the north, too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it
short
goes
of
right through.
culverting it or building a bridge, you end up with that other issue as well.
Thank you for all this information.
You're
and
welcome.
Thank you for
Yeah,
holding this.
absolutely.
And just keep in mind that we're all in the same boat if a fire happens.
Yes. And I think, and I appreciate that, and you know, when the city's gone through a number of changes too in the last decade, and they've had some new laws and rules as far as development, as far as tsunami zones. And now it's I think you can't have any more than 295 people in a gathering in a tsunami zone unless the building is built for a tsunami, like the OSU extension over here, which is a $20+ million building. So when we identified, when God led us to the hill where he told us to build the church, we just noticed that it had that blue strip right there. It says, oh, it happens to be right outside of tsunami zone, which we felt very privileged to not only satisfy the requirements of the city, but to also avail ourselves as a safe haven. We're the first place you're going to run to or go to in a danger. And the same is true with a fire. Pastor Adam Durkin on staff here at South Beach Church mentioned that at the CUP meeting, that during the Otis fires, we opened our church up immediately to those in need, and we had a transitional place here for them. It only lasted a few hours. We realized we were unequipped to house them overnight, so we took them over to the rec center. But we want to be as open, helpful, available in all good and bad days. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Denise Heiss, and I'd like to just say that for me personally, I'm not opposed to your church. I'm not opposed to the good that you're doing in the community or your members. That's not a question in my mind. What I am questioning is, for me, moving to Wilder was the beauty, the silence, the animal life. And that's been a hard pill for me to swallow right now, because the beauty of your lot is where elk would come and graze, and deer, and I haven't seen those for quite a while now, and that's so
Yeah.
sad for me. So,
You want to see the pictures I took today of them?
did you see
Yeah.
them?
Yeah.
There today?
Yeah, they were there
Oh,
today.
good.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah, and it made me feel good. I took pictures of them. I shared them with all our staff, and I actually felt it was a confirmation of God, and this is His land. It's so beautiful, and there was elk and other wildlife,
Yeah.
and I'm with you, Denise, in that everyone loves to go into the woods and loves to appreciate it, and that's why I actually we're at the foothills of the woods, and there's so much extra acreage. If you've ever been up in the Wilder Hills and up at the BGB property, it just is such a beautiful place. And so while there will be some development that continues to happen here in the city limits, we appreciate the wildlife so much. And it's an attraction, but it's also up to us to acquiesce to their lifestyles as well, to the best of our ability. So we love the animal life. It's a treat. And even when we look at the development needs in the parking lot, it does grieve me. It's like, really? That much parking? I love the trees. And so we're going to keep as many trees as we possibly can, and even create walking spaces, where we can mingle with the wildlife and appreciate them as well. And kind of I think one of the plans is the city has that trail system. They're calling it Coast to Corvallis. And so the whole idea is that there's going to be a trail system that starts right here and is just beautiful, and we hope it to be one of the most beautiful places in the city. So we're with you on that one, Denise. Yeah.
My main concern is, as my neighbors are, fire, evacuation, getting out quickly. To me, going out 50th, that's sketchy.
Yeah.
I don't even know there's many roads there.
Yeah,
I
it's true.
presume it's the right-hand road.
Yeah, stay to the right.
Right, yeah. That's scary considering we had disaster in Otis recently, and how they had trouble getting out. So with one in and out, that's huge for me.
Yeah.
The traffic alone has increased at 101. Making a left and right now is hard. So it's just concerning.
Yeah.
Also, noise, that's huge for me since I love the pristine of where we are. And the experience that we had back in August, I believe you had the event, that was troublesome for me because it was imposing. There was loudspeakers, bullhorns, traffic on our sidewalks cutting through, which we were told that would happen, but we didn't know there would be bullhorns, and it just was not a good experience for our first taste.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
I appreciate that.
that's it.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Who else wants the microphone? I'll take it from you and hand it to you. You want it? Okay.
Hi, I'm Carol Salvage from Wilder, and I just want to address a couple of things that have been brought up, and that's egress off of 50th. And Bonnie mentioned in our last HOA meeting that the school district is looking at purchasing land at the end of 50th, and that probably a connection to 50th from here is not going to happen until, or if they buy that lot and, do something with it, that would generate enough numbers and enough, need for different egresses than that we just simply don't have the numbers up here to develop that gravel road. Now, she didn't address the phase that's across Harborton, which is one of your things about the forest, is that that is part of one of her phases, and that a good portion of that forest is going to be developed. So there is going to be more noise. Well, well, as we saw with phase one, we still have one lot there that still needs to be developed. So some of these phases are moving sort of slow. So the development of across whatever number it is now across Harborton is probably going to take a while. And it may be that needs to happen before we have the numbers to generate a need to connect up with 50th. And she did mention that she was going to see about that. Ryan Parker has a key to those gates, and the cafe has a key to those gates. And I'm not sure if OCC does or not.
I'm sure they do.
Probably they do. And she was going to look into getting, could we facilitate somebody else having a key or something too? Because what if those people happen to not be there, or
Let
it's
me
a
interject
weekend or
a
something?
quick. Who owns that white gate? Is that private or is that
That gate is probably owned by the
Landways?
forestry management company up there, and I don't know if it's Hancock or Weyerhaeuser. They usually put the gates in, but there's several locks on that gate that are for properties that gain access through there. So there is Yacona Nature Preserve back there. They have legal right access through there. There is the Blueberry Farm. Gosh, I think that's right. There's several property owners, private property owners that have legal access
Barton
rights
has
through
land
there.
back there?
But one thing to consider is that the community college is designated as a community gathering location in the event of an emergency. And there are emergency supplies that are stockpiled there. And so the Lincoln County emergency management people will have that occupied in a heartbeat when there's any sort of an emergency that's going on. So I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue with that 50th Street being opened up, because it will be a hotbed of people, because that's the South Beach evacuation location as a community college.
And she did mention that fire trucks and stuff do have the keys and stuff, and would be able to access that road up. It's just us as a general population wouldn't be able to during normal.
I want to see there's at least 3 or 4 key boxes up near that gate.
Yeah.
I walk that every day, those routes, and there's just 2 or 3 locks that are encased in a steel tube, so that there's a
Right.
hacksaw blade or something. And to knock one of those gates over, you'd probably need a Bradley fighting vehicle or something like that to knock it over, because it's built pretty solid.
Thank you.
On the numbers that you say you have for attendance, like 270 during a service, is that including children?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not having 270 cars come off at a service, you're having much less than that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, on Easter, back to the 3, we call them 3 seats per 1 car, or 4 seats per 1 car is what the ordinance allows. And so we averaged 3.2 butts per car. And so it was actually higher than you would imagine, because it is, everyone drives alone, 2 people max, but we had 3.3 people per vehicle per service. And I think the most we had was like 142 or 47 cars in the parking lot on Easter, which is an abnormal Sunday.
Right.
So yeah.
Now, will you have, when, especially at a big service, like an Easter service, will you have somebody out there directing traffic? I mean, us coming off of Harborton will have the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And, I mean, not that we have that many cars coming off, but will you have somebody out there maybe directing traffic at the end of a service?
Yeah, I'll answer that question as fast as I can, because it's actually one of my dreams is to have a robust parking lot ministry, we call them. In Newport and on the Oregon coast, it's not as easy to do. Some of the larger churches have a parking lot ministry where you have people, ushers, wearing safety vests, and they have walkie-talkies and the flagger things, and they're greeting people as they come in, and they're also keeping things safe. It's hard to do every Sunday, because some Sundays it's blowing sideways and it's not very nice to ask your crowd to go out there and, hey, can you come greet people as they come in? But our big services we do. Every single big service, we make sure we have a team with walkie-talkies, safety, training, protocols. We stripe our own parking lot here to make sure that it's all ready to go and all those things. And I can imagine on Harborton, on a Sunday, on any given day, having somebody, a parking attendant, seeing 10 cars come down at once and there's no one coming. Hey, just keep going. Let's keep this moving fast. Let's try and get everyone out of here as fast and safe as possible. So the answer is yes.
Right.
It's a good ministry. It's really fun.
Right. Now, the south side of the church is the one that faces Wilder. And that's the one that doesn't have offices built around it.
Yes.
So, is there any, before I get to that, it looks like there's 2 sets of doors in there. Are those emergency exits only, or exits only?
Can you put the design up on the blueprint, Dave?
Right, see at the south side?
Yeah, Carol, I can answer that. So yeah, those are emergency exit onlys, and those are required by the Oregon Structural Specialty Code. So we have to have that access
So
out.
people are not, if you're in the middle of your worship service, people are not going to be entering those doors.
Correct.
It's only going to be through the entryway over there, reception area.
I can tease Luke a little bit, because in this building, he despises those doors being open because he doesn't like light from the side. So I am sure
he's
those
right.
doors will be closed.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the sound projection, so historically, all of our complaints and awarenesses of our existence have not come from the sides, but from the back. And so all of our subwoofers are on the back of the stage. Our speakers used to be up in this region here, and so there's houses behind us that heard us. So anything on the sides hasn't been the historical problem. So if you look at the design, if we continue with the same kind of amplification system, the stage will have a bunch of speakers near it, some of those other walls, and so I believe we'll be able to not have any problems on that south wall. Even though you're absolutely right, that's going to be the nearest other neighbors, and so we're aware of that. And we've even talked about building alcoves around those emergency exit doors, so that way when they do open up, they don't let sound leak out.
Okay. One of the problems we had in our former church up in the Seattle area was when we rebuilt was the youth group. They met Wednesday nights and they got loud. And during the summer, they would have the doors open, and they were right across from an apartment complex, and a friend of mine who also went to the church lived there. And so when they had the doors open, you could hear the music, and they cranked it up.
Yeah.
And so she knew the youth pastor, and she called him and said, hey.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, because those doors will be right there, is this going to, I realize we don't get the heat that we sometimes did up in Seattle and stuff, but will it be cooled enough that they don't have to open those doors, or will you forbid them from opening?
Well, one of the
those
problems
doors?
we have in this building is on those days where it is not, where it is warm
Yes.
and we're full of people, is we open the doors, and that really lets the sound out. This building doesn't have air conditioning. Most buildings in Newport don't. This building will, so that way we can keep the windows and doors closed without me sweating while I'm preaching, and the kids can then be inside. Additionally, Dave, if you put a different slide up that shows like maybe the most of the building altogether, kind of behind the building, this isn't the one, but behind the building is where we anticipate being some outdoor gathering. That's a good one right there. Right at the very top on the left, it says tax lot 0140009AC. That's
Measured how far it is from your new project up to the Wilder community? How far is that?
It depends, because if you go out Bonnie's land, which is the clearest access and the most foot traffic, it's cuts off about 150 feet. If you go off of our actual access point, I think the nearest house was 1,000 feet away.
It's over 1,000 feet and that's not like driving, that's as a bird flies.
Yeah, so it's pretty far away. It's not forever far, but it's pretty far.
I measured it. It was, for ours, because we're on that line. And it's over 1,000 feet as the crow flies.
Yeah.
And this isn't a city, this isn't your problem. This is more of a city problem where the notification is only 200 feet. We're from King County, and it was at least 500 there. And that's very populated. Out here, personally, and this is something I think we need to take up with the city, is that out here, it's much more rural. It could very well take 1,000 feet or more to get to your neighbor, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be notified.
Right.
And I don't think that's South Beach Church's problem. That's really the city's problem.
Yeah,
They
and-
need to expand that.
Yeah.
I also think, for the Wilder community in general too, as property owners, because Land Waves got a notice, but it didn't get disseminated out. And I know for the design team, when, we looked up the addresses and Land Waves is on there, and I'm like, okay, well, there we go. Wilder knows, they're getting the notification. So I can speak for us. I was shocked when everyone said that, they weren't aware of the application and that it had been submitted, or the annexation, which had happened 60 days prior, because, we were under the impression that it sort of gets disseminated once it hits Land Waves.
And we do apologize for that, because that must have been surprising or offensive, or even felt like something fast was happening. When from our vantage point, it was like in the front page of the paper. It's been a long, decade-long conversation, and we're just excited too. So we're just as excited as we can be moving that slow. So we do apologize for that not getting to your guys' attention as the rest of the community got it. Thank you for your questions. Anybody else have any concerns, questions? Knock jokes? Nothing? It's that time of night. Troy Hart, come on up. This is Troy Hart. He's one of our sound engineers. So he works
When
both.
it's loud, it's his fault.
It is. Oh, thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, give him Troy's number.
Thanks for mentioning that, Tim. We actually developed a relationship with our neighbors and said, look, if it's loud, here's all of the numbers you need to have. And none of them are 911. So here's the numbers of the most important people at the church. Text us, email us, or don't email. Text us and let us know it's too loud, or there's somebody. We've had people message us in the middle of the night saying that there's a drug deal going on in the parking lot, and wondering if that's something we could do about it, or if our security cameras have picked up on stuff. And that was exactly. Why are you texting me? No, I'm not there. And so we want to be conducive in that way, because it's so fun to be in our community. Like, we really appreciate everybody. We love everybody, and we want to. You can have all you guys can take my phone number down, and you can have that and text us at any times. And so Troy Hart also, as well as Eastside Taylor, has been in relationship with the people around us and getting those notifications. So this is Troy Hart.
Hey guys, as much as I like to blend in back there, and I don't like the microphone, I like to adjust the controls for it, but I heard a lot of questions about sound. And in the specifications for the sound deadening, there's a product called Quiet Rock, and there's extensive documentation on its sound attenuation and its properties if you were to look it up. But just the one sheet of the Quiet Rock 530 has a STC rating of 50, which generally is what is required for multi-dwelling units so that there aren't voices heard between the walls. That's just for one layer of the Quiet Rock 530. And so with our insulation and the Quiet Rock installed, it's going to surpass the STC of 60, which is what is used to prevent large institutions from bothering the neighbors around them. So the product, we're going to be going above what is even required, and it's actually kind of mind-blowing how well the product attenuates sound. So I mean, the outdoor service, yeah, those speakers outside, that was a whole different thing, but this has been really considered in the building plans for the new church.
Just be careful with Quiet Rock because there is a steel sheet that runs between the layers, and you might be setting yourself up with a Faraday cage. There's no cell phone, no Wi-Fi in or out.
I was reading there's actually another product that is a 530 RF, and they have one that is transmissible. I don't know how that works, but I actually installed the Quiet Rock 530 in a home theater in a retirement community with common walls, and this guy was dead set on having these down-firing 18-inch subwoofers. Kind of a long story, but he spent like 20 grand on this project because he wanted to have his home theater in a multi-dwelling building, and the numbers said it would work. I didn't believe it would work. We installed it, and there weren't upset neighbors. So like I have a personal experience with Quiet Rock and how well it works, and I really don't believe there should be any concerns.
18-inch woofers in a retirement community.
He was dead set on
I
it.
want to meet this guy. Thanks, Troy. Any other questions tonight? And I think what's going to happen next is, you guys have anything else to add tonight? So we really wanted to do this. Bonnie asked us. She was surprised that we hadn't generated this type of meeting on our own. We didn't know we were supposed to. We were under the impression that all those T's had been crossed and I's dotted based on all of the conversations we'd had for the many, many months and years. And so Bonnie said, hey, I want to put a continuance on this process, the CUP, so the Planning Commission wasn't allowed to vote last Monday, the 24th, or the next one is the 24th. And so we said, okay, what should we do? And so we had this meeting now, and it's documented online so people can find their answers to their questions. And we really, really, really appreciate all of the concerns. We value each and every one of them. We agree with them. We see them. And some of the things we're learning from these conversations are going to make it an even better project. And so thank you for that. What's next then is the next meeting on the 24th at 7. Hopefully it's a shorter meeting. I believe the last one was 3 hours. I Zoomed the whole thing from a Kentucky airport. And this next one's going to be shorter, hopefully, as the Planning Commission will look to us at South Beach Church and say, did you guys meet with the general community? And we'll say, yes, we did. And maybe there'll be some more questions from the Planning Commission, or maybe they'll just put it to a vote. I'm not quite sure. Hopefully you guys can be there on that this next Monday. You're not obligated to. We will be there. But other than that, I want to thank you guys. There's some plates on the way out. Grab cookies and stuff. We brought all those for you guys, so we'll go into a sugar coma if we have to take those ourselves. If you want my cell phone number, Luke Frechette, Pastor Luke Frechette, come and talk to me. I'll give it to you. You can have my cell phone number. You can communicate with me, or it's lukefrechette@gmail.com or southbeachchurch@gmail.com. Other than that, we appreciate you guys. If you ever see us working up on the hill, drop my name, Luke Frechette. Luke said I could stop by. Luke said the Elker, his friends, and my friends too. You guys are all welcome up there any time of the day, anytime you want. It's your park too. It's really, the church is an interesting developer. The church is an interesting customer. And we use this in negotiations with Bonnie and with every other person we tried to buy land from, and especially with Dave Stoker, my friend. I said, Dave, when you sell to the church, you're essentially selling to yourself, because he goes to church here. And we're not a closed church. We're an open church. And it's really unique. It's almost a mystery that land is now owned by everybody, because the church isn't owned by one person. It's a group of people that are dwelling together in that spirit of harmony. So that being said, we're so stoked to be part of this community, and we want to do better. And when we blow it, hold us accountable. Say, hey, it's too loud, or the kids were being kids, and we know that I got 3 kids. If you ever had kids are kids, and they need help being good kids. And so we're going to do our best to raise up the next generation. Other than that, thanks for being here tonight. Hang around, come get my information if you want it. And I appreciate you guys. You're dismissed. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.